Namaste and welcome to the very first episode of the Shakti Channel. I'm Dr. Pravina Rodrigues, and this is a space where we explore the living wisdom of Hindu goddesses, Kali, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, and so many more. Here we blend scholarship, lived practice, and timeless stories of the divine feminine, bringing together seekers, practitioners, and scholars from around the world. This channel is dedicated to connecting ancient wisdom to the challenges of our contemporary world and to celebrating the liberative power of Shakti, the divine feminine. To inaugurate this journey, we are honored to welcome a truly extraordinary scholar and pioneer, Dr. Rita Sherma. Dr. Sherma is director and professor at the Graduate Theological Union's Center for Dharma Studies in Berkeley, California. Her leadership and scholarship have been recognized worldwide with numerous awards. Most recently, she has received the Karma Seva Award from the Hindu Spiritual Care Institute for her service to the Hindu community in 2022, the South Asian Studies Association Exemplar Award in 2023, and the GTU Distinguished Faculty Award in 2024. She is not only a scholar, but also a guiding light for students and communities, bridging academic study with deep spiritual practice. Dr. Sherma, it's such a joy to have you with us for our very first episode of the Shakti Channel.
Thank you so much for inviting me for this inaugural episode for this channel, which I think is a very important intellectual and spiritual journey for all viewers. And I appreciate being here with you.
So before we turn to Dr. Sherma's personal journey with the goddess, I'd like to begin with a short reflection from the work of a leading scholar of religious studies, Dr. June McDaniel. Dr. McDaniel, in one of her lectures, she points out that there is a decline in the academic study of mystical and aesthetic experiences, experiences of trance states, visions, states of transcendence. These experiences, she says, in the past, they were central to religious studies, but now they have suddenly become unfashionable in religious studies. And she highlights this in her book, Lost Ecstasy. In that book, she shows how mystical experiences have not just waned, they are also criminalized, pathologized, sometimes even trivialized, both in theology and also in religious studies. Now, what's fascinating, though, is that this human yearning for ecstasy, not the drug, has not disappeared. And then she quotes the Pew Research Survey of 2016, which shows that more than 50% of Americans have had some kind of mystical experience. Whether they are religiously affiliated or not, they have experienced moments of deep peace, transcendence, or some kind of union with a greater presence. What she notes is that Hinduism, and specifically Bengali bhakti traditions, stand out in her study. And what she says is that these traditions keep aesthetic devotion at the center of their spiritual life. And her conclusion is powerful. Mystical and aesthetic experiences should not be dismissed. They are not a thing of the past. They're not a relic. They need to be taken seriously. They need to be re-engaged in academic work. Now, why do I share this? I share this particularly because Shakta traditions, the goddess worshipping traditions, remain deeply alive because of this aspect. And they hold experiences, such kind of experiences, not as pathological, but as a meeting place with the divine. And with that in mind, I'd like to now turn to Dr. Sherma, whose own journey brings together lived devotion and academic study in a remarkable way. So let's begin at the heart of it all. Dr. Sherma, how did your personal journey with the goddess begin, and how has it evolved over the years?
My personal journey with the Divine Mother began consciously when I started my master's at Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California, under the guidance of a scholar who was very interested in Shakti studies. She was a South Asia studies scholar. Unconscious start is when the earliest memory I have is I'm 3 years old. I'm inside what in Bengal we call a pandal, which is a huge tent, right? In India, it used to be. Now Durga Puja is now almost a corporate affair. But when I was 3 years old, and for the next 3 years, it was a neighborhood affair. The kids of the neighborhood, the teenagers, would gather donations. They'd put together this massive tent, pandal, and inside they would bring in a brand new pratima, murti, all of the beauty, all of the artwork, all of the flowers, the food, the purohit, the priest, and it would start. And as a child, I wasn't very interested in the because it's Bengal, so you have song and dance and drama and so forth. I wasn't interested. I was interested in sitting next to the purohit and just listening to the Devi Mahatmya while staring at her face. Because in that moment, all my problems as a 3-year-old disappeared. Okay. The things my mother scolded me for as a naughty child or whatever, all disappeared. And only thing that was there was her beauty and her love. And it was like waves of love, like Saundarya Lahari coming towards me as I heard the chant. The scent of the Devi incense, the Devi agarbatti was, the fragrance was all around me. I was immersed in that fragrance, immersed in the sound of the pot, the chandi pot, the recitation, immersed in her beauty, immersed in the fragrance of the flowers and the beautiful saris whirling about me. I mean, it was a sensorial feast, and yet it was a completely contemplative experience. This went on for 3 years, and then we left India, never to go back. And it's very important to remember that now, people who live in the Indian diaspora is the largest national diaspora on the planet, larger than the Chinese diaspora. 80% of that diaspora or slightly more are Hindu ancestry, and they're building temples all over the place. All sorts of stuff is going on. When I was a child, there were literally 0 temples. I grew up in French Canada. There were almost 0 Indians, let alone Bengalis, let alone Hindus, let alone Durga Puja. But it was the memory, that seed of that first encounter with the concept of the divine was feminine. My first encounter with the concept of the supreme was mother. And my first encounter of the idea of the noumenal was both explosive power and infinite grace. And it was wrapped up in the aesthetics of contemplative ritual studies. It was contemplative praxis. Now, the question one can ask oneself is, are all the ladies hurrying about planning for the khichdi in contemplative practice? I don't know. Are all the gentlemen and the kids preparing for the drama that night in a state of contemplative practice? I don't know. But can you encounter spirit in that moment? Can you immerse yourself in pure Chaitanya in that moment of this almost, because that degree of powerful aesthetic embodied experience can induce a kind of trance-like mindful contemplative state. If you want to, if your intention is contemplative, the power of the presence of that embodied praxis will take you there. If your intention is to have a good time, you will have a good time. So that seed remains with me, and nobody awakens it, no one disturbs it. It's buried deep underground. And then I start this one course in my master's program, which was, on the, fortunately for me, it wasn't about the material culture of the Devi or, pujas or temples. It was about theology. It was where is this coming from? Where are these ideas coming from? Tracing these ideas. And it was like ambrosia, it was like amrit, like nectar to my mind. And it brought back, like a rushing waterfall, all the memories of the 3-year-old. And everything changed.
So you would say that your personal journey with the goddess has evolved over the years? Would you?
I would say that what started during that master's program expanded and deepened, but it was all there. It was all there because, not because of what I read, not because of the content. There's all sorts of content. What happened is I began to see that the people who worship the Divine Mother, particularly the people I had seen as a child who were Bengali, so that they don't, and I'm talking about this is Durga worship. I don't see, I did not come across, because I didn't talk to acharyas and swamis and yogis. I talked about ordinary people, and I didn't come across anyone with any concept of what this meant. Well, yeah, you've got this beautiful icon, you've got this beautiful ceremony. What does it mean? At best, they'll say she will protect me. I mean, if you can reduce one of the most remarkable, profoundly sophisticated traditions of thought about the supreme reality into she will protect me when I go for my, vacation, something is not good. Something has gone wrong here, okay? And so this idea was with me since I was 3 years old. Like, I was like, why don't they sit with me and listen, Why do they scurry about all the time? But when I encountered not the content, as I said, but the concept that there are ideas woven together that create a tapestry that we theologians call theology, and other people who don't know will call religious philosophy, which is fine. But that there's an entire vision, not only of the divine, but what is the ultimate reality? Who are you in relation to that ultimate reality? How does that change your life, your world, your conception of the self? And what does that mean for the way you live in the world with others? All of this, that we could deduce this from religious philosophy, or rather theology. That affirmation, that confirmation that I received through my academic studies, that was priceless.
My next question is something that I think that viewers will particularly connect with, and it has to do with your personal experience. And I'm wondering if you can share a moment when you felt a profound connection with the goddess that has deeply impacted your work and life. I know you've had more than one, but more than one experience, a whole series. But I wonder if you can share just one moment for the sake of our audience that has shaped your background, your academic life, your work.
Let me put it this way. We all have a particular perception of reality, and somebody might believe everything. I had a friend, her name was Barbara, and long back when I was in, college, and she believed everything. So I told her, I had heard this really strange desire. And she said, oh my goodness, I believe everything. So that's fine. And I come from you know, my lineage of personal ancestral lineage, very important. So you're talking about the Divine Mother. I have to talk about the influence of Sri Aurobindo on my Nanaji, my grandfather, maternal grandfather. My maternal grandparents were very erudite, very spiritual, and they were both philosophers. They were amazing people. And he was a disciple early on of the guru who was named, I don't have the name in front of me, but it's the guru who is named in Autobiography of a Yogi as the Swami with two bodies, by location, that people claimed. He didn't say anything. People claimed that he could bilocate because people had experienced him in different locations. That's not the point. The point is that particular gentleman, my grandfather went to him when he was 15 and said, I want to, take Diksha, I want to take sannyas. He looked him up and down and said, young man, you are meant to be a sannyasi, but you're meant to be a griha sannyasi. And you will do much more good to the world as a griha sannyasi. You will remain my disciple, but you will be a griha sannyasi. So my grandfather was very disappointed. But eventually he did his bachelor's, he got married, he had children, he built a house. And then I came into his life. And we were very close from the very beginning. And my grandmother was such a remarkable woman that the ashram told the family, we want to be involved in her shraddha. We don't want you to do it with a priest. We want to be involved in shraddha. They took over. They said she's a very evolved individual. And so this is the two people who shaped me at the very core, very early on. And I remained in touch with them continuously through all the years alone, growing up in the frozen tundra of French Canada. And so they kept on transmitting to me. Later, my grandfather also became a disciple of the mother of Pondicherry. So every year, by the time I was at that famous age 3, by the time I was 3, he would send his family, his 5 kids, his in-laws, the children, he would send it to her for a blessing. It was common practice. We were never in there because we were in Mumbai, or those days, Bombay, and everybody else was in Calcutta and could take a family picture. One year, we left, we came to Calcutta, my father got a new position. And so we were in the photograph. My grandfather sent it to her. She sent it back with a blessing and said, but I need the picture of the child at the left corner at the bottom. There's a new child. Who's this? I need a full-size picture of this child. So my parents, who were very, very Europeanized, very Westernized, father was trained in Germany at a time, there were no Indians there, and then in Britain. And so they were not guru people at all, but they had immense respect for my grandfather. And my grandfather said, look, it's not going to hurt you. Just take a picture of the poor child and just send it to you. I said, oh my goodness, what is it she's going to say? The child is going to die young, or whether we're scared. And he said, no, she's going to bless you. She didn't take anybody else's picture, big picture. Maybe some terrible thing will happen. My mother was scared. And my grandfather said, it'll be fine. So they sent the picture to my grandfather. He sent it to her. She blessed it. And she wrote on the back of the picture, this child belongs here. And she sent a very short note to my grandfather, make an appointment with Rajendra. I need to see this child and its parents, her parents. And this child belongs here. My parents were like, no way, no how are we going to take our only child and dump her in some silly ashram with some guru? And my grandfather said, no, you don't do that. Take a vacation, go there for my sake, because I have a relationship to keep with her. And they said, well, we could use a nice vacation. And Pondicherry has a beach. Why not? So they took off 3 days and we went there. And we were invited inside. She didn't come out anymore. She was to just give, darshan from the up there in the balcony. But we were invited inside, and she was in a large chair. And my parents, did pranam and sat down, and I just didn't know what to do. And she told me to come and sit beside her leg.
And this is the
I
mother
went
of
and sat.
Pondicherry.
Yes. So after a few seconds, she put her hand on my shoulder. Slowly, very slowly, things started to become a little bit hazy, and I thought I was feeling sleepy, but that's not what happened. From the hazy, it began to be shimmery, and I soon lost track of the people and the objects in the room, and it felt like Disneyland, all shimmer, shimmer. And after a long time, I don't know how long, I don't remember, she finished talking to my parents, and she removed very slowly, I remember that, slowly removed her hands, fingers by fingers, and things started coming back to normal. I started hearing voices, and then everything became very clear again. And I thought, that was nice. I like it here. 3 years old, that's the best I can do. But when it was time for us to leave, I have letters from hilarious letters from the people there, because I refused to go. I clung on to the gate with both legs and both arms like a small monkey, and I refused to leave. Like they had to pry me apart, my cold, dead hands, from the metal to take me away. And so we went back. And my parents discussed with great length with my grandfather, and luckily it didn't work, but they decided, okay, we'll give it a shot for a couple of years and see how it works. And so the week I'm supposed to go, which is within another 8-9 months, I'm supposed to go. It's because they set it up with astrology, not my parents, but the ashram. Muhurta has to be right, the muhurta. And 1 week before, my mother started feeling uncomfortable. The day before, she has emergency appendicitis, and she's in the hospital. My father calls them and says, I am so sorry, I'm having a medical emergency. My wife's getting, and so we'll have to postpone her coming. And they said, so sorry, the muhurta has passed. And then a few years later, we left for the West, and of course never came back. But that experience, the mother of Pondicherry and Sri Aurobindo, their books, their not paintings, but photographs, were always over my bed, on my bookshelf, in my room, for the rest of my life. And the way I read Sri Aurobindo, even as a child, even as a teenager, when my grandfather would send me these books, I read it as with what I now recognize, Shakti lenses. Now, how did I have Shakti lenses? I had zero lenses. I'm a kid. But somehow, the way I read it then is the way I read it now.
I just want to jog your memory a little bit. So can you share, how the mother of Pondicherry actually told your parents, I think it was, that you would be a lover of roses, and that you would speak French?
She said not to my parents, but to whoever was with them. 2 people were with them. I remember that. And she said, this is what I heard. This child will grow up to speak my mother tongue fluently, and she will be a nice artist like me. She'll also love gardens. This is what she said to them. Okay. Now, I smiled and nodded happily and looked at my mother joyfully and said, "Yes, I will." And my mother said, "Shut up. You don't know what she said, idiot." Basically, in very salty Bengali. And then one of them, I think it was right in that he spoke Bengali. So he said, "But she's right." What, no, he said to me, what did you hear? I said, "She said this. She said this, and I love flowers, and I'm very good at painting. Ask my parents, I have a special teacher for my painting. And also, I like languages. And so I don't know what her language is, though." That's what I said. And he turned to my parents and said, "Does she speak French?" And my parents said, "No." And they said, she knew exactly what the mother said. So that didn't make my mom more respectful towards my 3-year-old self, but she didn't argue with me.
That's amazing.
It's a
You
prophecy because I ended up living in French Canada. I ended up being an artist. I was a commissioned artist before I went into, academics. And of course, one of my spiritual experiences is gardening. It's a core puja for me, right?
I would love for you to share your experience on the bus on your way back from Denver.
This was Denver. Everything happened to me in Denver. And I went to the bus and I took the bus. And I hadn't, my hotel was very far away from the center. Because of traffic, it took almost an hour to get there. I sat down on the bus. And the only thing that kept coming to my mind, this was after 9/11, and I could only think of Daniel Pearl. Daniel Pearl was the journalist who worked for Washington Post, and he was brutally murdered by the Taliban somewhere in Pakistan. And his wife was expecting their first child, and when she got this news, and the horror of what happened to him, it just kept going over and over again in my mind. If you ask me why, I can't tell you. I don't know why. It's just, I began to ask this one question like a mantra: why? And the why was, why so much suffering? I mean, I can understand natural disasters, disease, and death, but this unnecessary additional horrific suffering that some people put on humanity. Why? This is my question, right? I'm not asking anybody. But I couldn't stop asking this, stop after stop. They kept picking up people. I was no longer aware of them. I just kept saying, why, like a koan. And I don't know why I was doing that either. Suddenly, I felt and saw in my mind's eye. It's not like I was having visions, but it's very difficult for me to explain this because it's a vision when you're experiencing it. Afterwards, when you try to understand it, then you try to make sense of it. And then you say, well, it must have been something I was imagining or visualizing. But I wasn't, you see, because I wasn't thinking of the divine. It was more of an existential, I was almost trying to get this answer from within myself. Why? And because animals don't do this. They don't go and torture other animals. They don't do that. And so suddenly there's this luminosity, and I look up, and it's her. Completely light, completely luminous. And I'm sitting next to the window, driving on this empty highway, and the night sky is crystal clear, and there's stars all over, and they seem to be all over her hair, but she is bright, vivid, luminous. And she said simply, because it brings you closer to me. And then I'm like, that's terrible. That's terrible. That's not good. And I started trying to make sense of that, okay? Without questioning, where is this coming from? Am I seeing something? I just started to think, what does that mean? As I began to do that, she disappeared. It's not that she disappeared from the vision. There's vision disappeared, but she disappeared in a way that my consciousness felt there is no she, that she does not exist. And that made me terrified. For the first time in my life, I experienced spiritual terror, like a dark night of the soul, because there's no divine. And I said, no, that can't be. But then at that moment, I disappeared. I completely disappeared. There was nothing here. This is not nothing. All I recall is this boundless, rushing river of light, touching everything and seeking only one thing, novelty. So it is driven by desire. It is this river of light. It is agentic. It has agency. And it is seeking novelty. And this is all, there was no me, so I can't say this has happened. This has happened. After a long time, I heard a very loud screech, which must have been the brakes of the bus. And I came to, so to speak. When I came to, I didn't ask, who am I or where am I, but what is this? What is this? And I couldn't fathom how I was imprisoned in this thing. And then it started coming back to me. I'm a person, I'm a human, I'm so-and-so, I'm in a bus. I was like, oh my God, I'm back. How horrible. How utterly horrible. How utterly horrible. And then I realized that my face was soaking wet. Tears had wet my shirt. Even my scarf, my coat was soaking wet with tears. I didn't know where they came from because I wasn't there. So I went inside my hotel. I took the stairs to avoid anybody on the elevator because I could not talk. And I went to my room. I sat on my chair. I had a coat, a scarf, and, small boots on, and it was very uncomfortable. And I said, good, I am going to stay this way because I refuse to let this go. And if I sleep, I'm done. I will never remember. So I sat like that almost all night, and I was sort of in and out. And then I fell asleep and fell on the floor and got up and said, oh my God, I'm late for my flight. And then everything was due. It's like the most horrible thing to come back and say, oh my God, I'm back. How can that be? How, devastating. So the Buddhists have a saying, no self, no problem. So, that was like, it's not an experience that left me in bliss. It left me with a peace so profound, the peace that passeth understanding. So profound. It's not that everything will be okay. No. Everything is okay. Everything always was okay. Everything will always be okay because everything is simply the divine. Now, we know this because we study philosophy, but to go there, it's ineffable. It's ineffable, and the difference between somebody like myself falling into that is the difference between a Brahmavast, and this is Swami Dayananda Saraswati Pujya Swami. Apparently, according to someone, actually, I think he said it in upstate New York when we were sitting with him somewhere. And he said, if you give me a Brahmavastin, a mystic, I don't know what to do, because the Brahmavastin does not have a technology to create more Brahmavastins, right? But a Brahmavadin can easily create hundreds and hundreds of Brahmavadins. And some of them might turn into Brahmavastins. So if I have to make a choice, I will create Brahmavadins. Now, so we who study these deep, I don't like the word spiritual because it's so vague, but in my context of Hinduism, to study scripture that is about the nature of reality, that's Brahmavada. Commentaries on that by realized persons is also Brahmavada. We can do this. I can do this. I can teach others to do this. This is what I've done with my life, because I don't know how to make Brahmavastins.
So how do you, as a scholar, bridge, intellectual scholarship and these profound experiences that you've had?
Traditionally, across the millennia in India, there's this entire remarkable culture of respecting contemplative, mystical, direct experience of noumenal reality. Buddhist, Jain, Hindu, yogic. This does not exist anywhere else. It does go through Buddhism into the rest of Asia, but it is born in India with a very long history. Now, the thing is that you could say, yeah, but what's the point of it, right? That is, if you understand reality, if that is your goal of your civilization, then everything else is penultimate to that. Everything else comes later, less important. And therefore, conflict, warfare, all of this, that's there, but it's not paramount. It's not paramount, okay? Because to seek true understanding of the nature of reality itself, whether we're looking at, other Asian Buddhist traditions like Southern School of Chan or all of the Indian traditions, you have to elevate the entire civilization to support something like this. It's like America had elevated its civilization, if you like, to support the calling of science with massive social support, governmental support, political support, funding support, and it became the world's center for science, right? So the whole society has to align itself to this. And in India, the alignment was, we want to understand the nature of reality. That's it. That is an amazing scientific quest, okay? It's actually transit scientific, but it's very important. And I don't, that's an entire conversation. But if you're looking at understanding, we go back to this word understanding, right? I'll share a short story about this. When my husband was 4 years old, and he had a man, a young fellow called Gulab Singh, who was his guardian, played with him and taught him. And one day they were sitting in a room, and my husband's father, my father-in-law, was entering the room, and my husband's 4-year-old asked Gulab Singh, what are all those little dots in the light? There's a ray of sunshine coming in. And Gulab Singh said to him, that's God. So my husband said, God is in that light? And then Gulab Singh said, no, God is everywhere. So he said, is God inside me? So Gulab Singh said, yes, and he's also in your food and in the whole house. And that light is definitely all of God. And so my husband said, where is God not there? And Gulab Singh said, there's nowhere where God is not there. Gulab Singh is not educated. He's 15 years old. He's from some hill station far away. And he has this knowledge. And this knowledge has come to him through the transmission over centuries, through his grandfather, through that man's grandfather, etc. And their gurus that came through. And so my father-in-law said what was amazing to him is not the insight, but how someone like that has that insight. So this, not everybody, here's the Brahmavad and Brahmavastan issue. It is a privilege to be a Brahmavadan. It's a privilege. I mean, you have to have support. You have to have, financial support. You have all sorts of support to be able to be a Brahmavadan, okay? You have to have teachers, transmission. But to be a Brahmavastan, to be a mystic, to experience, touch the face of supreme reality. If you have grace, using a religious word, you need nothing, right? Ramana Maharshi sat there and he was enlightened. So there's great value in that. And the tradition of valuing interiority and insight is a fantastic tradition that India cannot afford to lose. And when people look at rituals and, all sorts of consecrations, this and that, and they say, this is garbage, this is meaningless, my answer is, well, of course it is meaningless to you because you don't know the meaning, okay? These are embodied practices that transform consciousness because we're not disembodied creatures. We have bodies. The bodies act as yanas. They're vehicles. These vehicles, if you put the right gas in, or petrol, I think they call it there, it will go, right? Or EV these days. You have to put in the energy for that vehicle to take you where you want to go. That energy, whether it's EV or gas or whatever, is the embodied praxis.
My final question to you is basically looking outward to the wider world. How do you see the wisdom of the goddesses speaking to the challenges that we face today? We are facing ecological challenges, social challenges, even, day to day, we face challenges in our workspace. How do you see the wisdom of the goddesses speaking to these challenges?
So I think about Shakti as a singular concept. When we engage in our own sadhana, then we connect with different aspects of her. But the foundational, nominal, supreme reality that she represents is singular. And that supreme reality, the theology from that, I call it, and I'll say why I call it this. I call it radical divine immanence. I don't mean hippies by radical. What I mean by radical is from the Latin word radix, which means root. She is immanent, that is present in the root of matter itself. Okay. And we know that because she's Prakriti. She's also Chit Shakti. She's Prakriti Shakti. She's a Chit Shakti. She's Jnana Shakti. But she is Prakriti Shakti. And she moves, the Chit Shakti moves through Prakriti Shakti. And manifestation happens. But how does it happen? Does she project? Does she emanate? Is it all a illusion or delusion. No, it's parinama. It's her own transformation. As you, as me, as the dog, the tree, the mountain, the river, the entire universe. It's her transformation. There's all sorts of ecological implications to that. I've written tomes on that. I've written, a lot of stuff on this. But what I'm going to say today is it has an implication for bodily justice. I've seen so many gurus, we all have, I'm sure, where they're asked, what about the suffering of this person? And the guru will say, you must remember, you are not the body. You are not the mind. You are not suffering. This is what I call spiritual gaslighting. Okay? Because we are absolutely the body when we're in the body, okay? When we're dead, no, we're no longer the body, okay? Right now, we are the body, we are the mind, and we are infinite consciousness. And we cannot be in a state of awareness of our infinite, of ourselves as infinite consciousness all the time. So yes, suffering occurs. Now, when you see Shakti as real, not as achit, but as filled with chit, Prakriti is filled with chit. Matter is agentic. She's radically immanent within the heart of matter. Biopotentiality lies within the heart of matter. You are matter. You are she. Of course, because she says, I am Purusha and I'm Prakriti, right? She's both. So it's not just your imagination. Your pain is her pain. Your suffering is her suffering. Your trauma is her trauma. You want to worship the mother? Look after the bodies of human beings. They're hungry, tortured, miserable, harmed bodies. Heal those bodies because you're healing the mother. You are healing the divine mother. You are worshiping her. The greatest puja on earth is the puja of suffering bodies because Harinamavada is her way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma. That was really beautifully put. I think that the Shakta way is the via positiva. And Hindu traditions, specifically Shankaracharya traditions, 3/4 of Vedanta, the Upanishads, is via negativa. Not this, neti, neti. You are not the body, you're not the mind, you're not the senses, so on and so forth. And then there is a little bit of via positiva, which is you are also this. But I think the human mind is such that it tends to cling to the negative aspect more. And I think that Shakta traditions, as you so beautifully elaborated, are the via positiva pathway. Dr. Sharma, thank you for gracing us with your wisdom and presence today. You represent all things Shakti, and this is a perfect way to launch the Shakti channel. Thank you so much for being with us. Namaste.
Namaste. It has been my privilege and my honor, and may you be blessed in this divine endeavor.
Thank you so much.